Well, hello. Today we are talking about Abilify. Abilify is an atypical antipsychotic that is used to treat such horrendous things as schizophrenia or bipolar or schizoaffective, sometimes sleep problems, and sometimes depression. And by and large, it's also used to treat a bad diet, which is a lot of the reasons why people have these type of symptoms. I myself had blood sugar swings that were causing what would be by all rights schizoaffective disorder. I mean, I was really out there, but it's just because I was sensitive in the way of blood sugar and I wasn't eating right. Things like that happen a lot to people who are having bipolar sort of dispositions, and even all the way up to the schizoaffective class. So one of the things that we do when we're helping people with Abilify is look at their diet. What does Abilify do in the brain? How does it work? Well, if you ask the pharmaceutical companies, they don't know. What it's reported to do is to hold back an excitatory neurochemical called dopamine, possibly glutamate as well. But it's holding back the neurochemical that actually stimulates us. Stimulates us to have a sense of reward, stimulates us to get out of bed and get a job, or stimulates us to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a significant other, to go to school, those sorts of things. It propels us into doing something. And it holds back that neurochemical, because obviously if you have too much of that, and you're trying to do everything all at the same time, it would look quite manic and very disjointed. So that's what it's meant to do, is to hold back that dopamine. What happens though is a person has been taking Abilify for a while, when you're trying to taper off of the Abilify, you basically, if you've been holding back dopamine, so instead of it flooding dopamine into a synapse, this is a representation of a synapse, instead of the dopamine hitting the receptors transmitting that signal down to the next neuron, you have a limited amount of dopamine coming out, hitting the receptors. So in the face of that understimulation, since our bodies and since our brains and since our spirits want to have a sense of reward in the world, the creative neuroadaptation and neuroplasticity that happens within the nervous system just says, okay, well, something is holding back the dopamine. We don't know what this foreign poison is, but in response to that, we're going to build up more dopamine receptors so that the little bit of dopamine that's coming through has a higher chance of hitting something. It's like going from one tuning fork to like maybe 10 tuning forks, so that the sound or the chemical expression of that dopamine can have a better chance of hitting something and resonating with it and transmitting that signal. So now when you take away the drug, you're getting more dopamine hitting an excessive number of tuning forks or receptors that will then transmit that excitability. So there's a bit of a, just like with any drug, whether it's cocaine, whether it's heroin, whether it's an antidepressant, there is a withdrawal manifestation. And for this particular drug, the withdrawal manifestation looks like you now have a near normal amount of dopamine hitting an excessively revved up, hypercharged receptors, anywhere from 37 to 98% increased in their receptivity based upon genetics of how much they're going to transmit that dopamine. So you've got a bit of warping that then needs to neuroadapt back to the direction. This makes these type of withdrawals, and the Abilify withdrawal and the antipsychotic class in general, are the most complicated withdrawals, because it looks very much like you just messed up when you're doing this withdrawal too fast and the person has to go back on drugs and they get disheartened that that's all there is for them. Now, I'm not saying, I've been in the saddle now for 15 years doing medication withdrawal, and there are definitely people who have a better quality of life in the presence of medications. That's a narrower few than we have been led to believe, by and large. I mean, there are people who have such ridiculous autistic or certain types of dispositions where they're having seizures, or they have a level of Tourette's or something that just makes their life miserable without something. But that doesn't include medicating the people who have bad diets and things that are largely overlooked. I mean, we have, as a society, we have very, very, very little lens to show us how bad the food that we're eating really is. I mean, the food that's most available to us does not have the capacity to balance blood sugar, for one, or to create any of the neurochemical components that constitute mental health. We're basically eating dead stuff that is flavored in such a way that we're tricked into eating it, that has no capacity to produce brain health. Second, we're immersed in so many chemical toxins that poison neurochemical pathways, such as COMT and other pathways, that, it's no wonder that any of us are even sane at all. So when we clean that stuff up, we start moving our bodies, and we surround ourselves with people who have a healthy mindset, it is phenomenal, the medicine that really is. It's. I know it sounds super, super ridiculously trite and simple, but having seen that flip happen in people 15 years straight, and having worked with several thousand patients residentially, and bona fidely talked to over 20,000. On our database, there's a way to show how many people I've talked to, over 20,000 people, and watch their progress too. I'm not giving you trite information when I say that diet, exercise, and who we surround ourselves with is probably the cornerstones of mental health, and not medications.